Hey everyone. So, as I travel around the world, the one thing that I've been seeing really for about the past 7 to 8 years is this increasing anxiety and worry about the future, which is now kind of manifesting itself in the phrase of fear of the future. Now, in this little video blog, I'm going to show you why the future is better than you think. However, I'm going to back it up with some stats and evidence and everything else. But, let's now level set. Okay, where is this fear actually coming from? Now, when we actually have a look at the general future, we are realistically at the point where we are telling our children that the future is going to be crap. And the reason for that is because the news networks are telling us that artificial intelligence is going to take all of our jobs. It's generally going to kill us at some point. On top of that, we have the climate crisis. Now, we have global temperatures that are now hotter than they've ever been. We've got ocean acidity that is higher than it's ever been. We have droughts around the world. We have the United Nations calling out 129 countries by 2030 that will have extreme water stress, which is enough not to be able to grow crops. We're living in times of hyperinflation. We're now living in times basically where even basic food staples like rice and wheat are difficult to get hold of. On top of that, the cost of living crisis is actually smashing us in the face. So when we actually have a look, really not just at the future, but we actually have a look at the now, there's a lot to be relatively unhappy about. But when we start flipping it back to the future and start extrapolating out all of these different things, the fact of the matter is that based on models, it looks like the world will get hotter. Sea levels will rise. That will affect over 35 of the world's megacities like Shanghai, which will increasingly become underwater by the years 2050 to 2100. Now that means that we will see 800 million people displaced from those megacities, which increases both economic and climate migration, which is also something that we're actually seeing increase. So overall, basically, we have all of these issues, and then load on top of that famine. There's not going to be enough food to feed 8 billion people, let alone 10 billion people by 2050. And you can really see why a lot of people are actually now not only taking antidepressants, but are now starting to stick their heads in the sand. However, when we actually start having a look at it from the other side of the fence, the fact of the matter is we already have the technologies today to eliminate over 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So let's dig into that a little bit. Now, when we have a look at concrete produces about 8% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. We can now actually use carbon dioxide from the air to turn concrete either carbon neutral or even carbon negative. So that's one solution that we have. We are electrifying almost all industries, whether it's the transportation industry or whether it is the heavy industry. So let's dig into that. Now, last year, we installed over 250 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. About 85% of that was, as expected, wind and solar, with nuclear, hydro and other things basically taking up the rear. Now, that compares with only 65 gigawatts of new fossil fuel energy generation capacity. So you can see that we are accelerating the green energy transition. And as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that is accelerating even faster. So when we have a look at the rollout of electric vehicles, actually, generally, most electric vehicle sales are growing at about 65% year on year globally, albeit from a very low base, admittedly. That's it. So the number of electric and hybrid vehicles that are being sold is increasing. The electrification of transportation is happening. When we actually have a look at other areas, basically like aviation, aviation is responsible for a significant amount of carbon dioxide. So typically the transportation sectors accumulate about 30% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. When we have a look at the aviation sector, we've got new electric and hydrogen-fueled aircraft coming through, but they will actually take probably a decade before we start seeing them in commercial fleets. When we have a look at shipping, We're seeing companies like Maersk that are converting a lot of their bunker fuel-based cargo ships from bunker fuel, which is one of the most polluting forms of fuel on the planet by far, and they're converting them to a mixture of different things: liquid natural gas, ammonia, sustainable fuels, biofuels, as well as basically the electrification of cargo ships. Now, in addition to that, when we have a look at the future of some energy technologies, we can actually start making energy from seawater when it comes to cargo ships. And again, it's carbon neutral. In Europe, we have solar fuels. So if we do have industries that need hydrocarbon-based fuels, then we can extract carbon dioxide from the air, we combine it with a catalyst, and we actually create something called a solar fuel. Now, solar fuels are like green diesel and so forth, not Vin Diesel, different one, but like green diesel, they are hydrocarbon-based fuels. They do kick out CO2 when they're burned, but that CO2 is a closed loop cycle. Now, starting to step away a little bit basically from greenhouse gas emissions, let's have a look at food. Today, we can take a cell from an animal, put it into a bioreactor and grow a chicken nugget. One cell can feed the entire planet, literally, because we've mastered what happens inside of an animal, outside of an animal. Now, when we have a look at the agricultural sector, that represents about 20% basically of all greenhouse gases, but also 70% of all fresh water consumption. So when we have a look at fresh water consumption, we can increasingly grow crops in vertical farms. We need to scale them, etc., etc. I'll come on to all that in a bit. But we can grow crops in vertical farms with 99% less water. Now, if we actually extract water from the air, because there's 2.4 zetatons of water in the Earth's atmosphere, then you can actually grow crops using 100% less potable water. Now, pump carbon dioxide into a vertical farm, and those plants have a 30% higher yield. Now, because they're actually in a vertical farm in a closed space, they don't need herbicides, they don't need pesticides. In addition to that, you can grow 8 crops a year. You can grow over 350 times more produce in the same footprint as a traditional farm, bearing in mind that when we actually have a look at traditional farms, around 40 to 50% of all of the food that we grow on the planet is either being destroyed by pests and pestilence and or extreme weather. So when we actually have a look at water, if we are able to start transitioning agriculture, for example, from its current state, even with precision agriculture, into what we call AgTech 3, we have a way to solve, shall we say, some of, not all of, the droughts that we actually have, because agriculture uses a staggering amount of water. If you can grow a beef burger in a bioreactor, you don't need the cow, you can reforest the Amazon rainforest. Now, when we start having a look at poverty and wealth inequality, using Web3 technologies, we can create cooperatives. So Facebook, for example, could actually be a blockchain-based cooperative, and anyone who uses the network could get an automatic share of the profits. Now, of course, Mark Zuckerberg's not going to do that, because why would you? However, again, a lot of this demonstrates that we have the technology today to solve a lot of the world's problems and challenges. However, the biggest challenge, as always, is deployment. When we have a look at the green energy transition, it's estimated it will cost $92 trillion. However, that's against a $35 trillion cost that we believe it would actually cost us to make the world's infrastructure, so think of coastal defences, cities, bridges, roads, highways, all that kind of stuff, resilient to climate change. So when we actually have a look at the future in terms of AI taking our jobs, now AI basically can actually automate fully or partially up to 80% of all of the jobs that we do today, because your job is a process. If we understand the steps that you have to go through for your job, we can turn it into an algorithm and then we can make you redundant. So that's one thing that we could do. However, while 80% of jobs, according to OpenAI, McKinsey, Oxford University, are partially or fully automatable, have you considered this? 100% of jobs, 100% of humans could be augmented using technology. So at the 311 Institute, we've been using artificial intelligence to help our staff and our students learn new things, new skills, 6 times faster. Kids love that. Now, it's all very easy talking about all of these different problems, these different solutions. Human ingenuity is amazing, but deploying them is where we really get stuck. And that's where we need capital. That's where we need corporate momentum. That's where we switch, for example, from traditional capitalism to what's called ethical capitalism, where people and the planet and the companies that use ethical capitalism win. And I talk to a lot of customers basically about ethical capitalism. And some of the world's Fortune 50 are now starting to move much more towards ethical capitalism. We can talk about sustainable business practices. We can talk about the circular economy. We can talk about recycling. When we have a look at recycling, how many of you actually recycle everything that can be recycled? I guarantee none of you. So every year we use 100 billion tons of the planet's resources, but actually only around 8 billion of those tons is actually recycled and then repurposed into new things. So yes, there is this huge amount of anxiety bubbling up and welling up about the future, but it's partly because the narrative of the future is being controlled by organizations that show you the negatives. How many organizations show you what's possible, show you what we're doing, how we're deploying it? Generally none, because I watch all of them. So if you look at the negatives, then you will be a society that walks to the darkness. And there's a little saying on this. People who lose hope will generally just sit at home, lock themselves away in their basements, and never come out. However, people who have hope will more than often go the extra mile basically to make it a reality. So while you might be anxious about the future, there are solutions. There are communities that you can join. There is evidence that you can see for yourself that we are making a difference as a society. And now, what are you going to do? Are you going to stick your head in the sand? Are you going to remain anxious? Or are you going to turn that anxiety basically into action? And if you want to know how you can act, the places you can go, the communities that you can join, the sources of information that you can actually look at, just DM me. I'm always around somewhere in the internet verse. Take it easy and have a good future. Take care. Goodbye.